Last week, we were talking about co-dysregulation, and this week, we're going to talk about more ways that it can show up and how it can particularly show up in interactions, and that can lead us to feeling a stronger distrust in ourselves in a relationship. Hi, I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, and welcome to the Wired for Wellbeing podcast, where each week we explore how understanding our nervous system can help us transform the way we live, love, and relate. And by the way, if you enjoy what we share here, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. And each week I am gladly able to share this podcast with my good friend and producer, Steve Lasari. Steve, hi, how are you?
Hey, Jeffrey. Hey, everybody. I'm doing great. I got to sleep under the stars last weekend, which always feels like a nervous system reset for me. So I am recharged and ready for this fun discussion today. So how are you doing? How's it going?
I'm great. I would like to sleep under the stars, but it's been a little too hot and smoky here.
Well, I have a voicemail that I'm going to play from you from a gentleman named Chris. And I'll remind our friends in the audience here that if you have a question, we've got a voicemail number that you can call into. I'll leave that in the show notes as well as at the end of the episode. We'd love to get your questions, and we'll have some instructions on how to get those to us so we can bring them into the podcast. But Jeffrey, let's take a listen to this question from Chris.
I'm calling to understand co-regulation. I've been married to my wife, Anne, and we both came from very traumatic backgrounds, very dysfunctional families where we both experienced various forms of abuse. In the area of co-regulation, one of the things that I find that has really kind of tripped me up is I find myself constantly trying to monitor what my wife's state is. And it's exhausting. My wife came from a family that toxic positivity was the norm. I find myself really trying not only to manage my state and trying to figure out what is it that I need to get a little bit closer to a ventral state, but I'm also finding myself that I have such desire to be in harmonious regulation with my wife that I'm constantly kind of managing, or not managing, but monitoring what her state is and second guessing what I'm seeing because of the environment of toxic positivity that's so pervasive. It's very difficult for me because I feel like I'm almost becoming an auditor to her state and second guessing what she's telling me and trying to find a way to give her what she needs, not only for her benefit, but also for the benefit of our marriage and me. I know Deb Dana has spoken a lot about the 4 questions one needs to ask about, what our state is and what we need to get closer to ventral, what someone else's state is, and what perhaps they might need to help them get closer to ventral. I think perhaps I have a general misunderstanding of how that works in a co-regulation context, because when I find myself doubting what my wife's state is, at least what her outward state may be, I find myself getting into a dysregulated spiral just from that. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Now, there is a lot there, Jeffrey, but before we start to take a deep dive down any of them, I kind of want to get some terms out of the way. So maybe resisting the urge to kind of continue to unpack, maybe you can just help us understand. I've got 3 terms. The first, just to make sure we're all on the same page, co-regulation. Can you just give us the Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein definition of co-regulation?
Okay, well, we use co-regulation in contrast to self-regulation. So self-regulation is any time that an individual engages in a somatic practice, a grounding practice, a reframing practice, something that helps them move more towards regulation. That's self-regulation. We're guiding ourselves there. Co-regulation is when we are including someone or something outside of us to help guide us there. It could be a walk in nature. We're co-regulating with nature. It could be meditating or listening to beautiful music. But often our co-regulation can come from relationships, whether it's with a favorite pet or a person. And like I was mentioning last week, just as often as we can experience co-regulation, we can often experience co-dysregulation, which is that our interactions with someone can actually make us more dysregulated. We can help dysregulate each other. And that's often where conflict occurs in couples and in many teams when there is a process of co-regulation that's going on and that people are getting more and more dysregulated when they're interacting. And so what happens, right, is when any of us are dysregulated, we're not in a more regulated state, we actually become less capable of connection. So if we're co-dysregulating, if we're in a fight and co-dysregulating each other, we're not only going to be very unlikely to resolve the fight, but we're going to feel less and less connected to each other, which is actually going to help us spiral more and more into a reactive state, angry or anxious or shut down and collapsed.
Excellent. Second, Dr. Jeffrey Wetstein term I need to, again, just to make sure everybody in our audience is on board with us, is Chris used the word ventral. He was describing Deb Dana's guided exercise, as well as something that you use quite a bit for the 4 guiding questions. And he used returning to ventral, getting ourselves to ventral. Maybe you can just make sure we're all familiar with what that word ventral means.
Sure. So there's from polyvagal theory, ventral is what is called the more scientific name for being in regulation. And it does not mean that we have to be 100% in ventral, that we have to be 100% regulated. But a lot of processes and practices are aimed at helping us at least try to get a couple of toes back in ventral, or a little bit more than that. And so ventral is just another name for meaning in regulation, a regulated or more regulated state. Want to make clear it's not a perfectly regulated state.
And then the last term I want to unpack, and this might be a little bit more obvious for people, but again, same page. Chris mentioned that his partner, Anne, demonstrates this idea of toxic positivity at times. And can you just make sure we're all on the same page? And maybe that might start then transitioning us to start unpacking what you've heard in Chris's question.
So toxic positivity is differentiated from healthy positivity. Toxic positivity is usually a belief that can be often implicit, just kind of held without really understanding or being conscious of what it's doing. But it's a belief or perspective that we should always be positive. And why it's called toxic is that its impact for the person who's experiencing this, or for the person who is receiving this from someone else, is that it's often a rejection of the reality of our nervous system states. In other words, any state that's not regulated and happy can be met with, just think positive. Don't focus on the negative. At least you weren't harmed more. At least this is going to come from some good. There's always a reason why everything happens. Or a really famous one is, happiness is a choice. You just need to choose happiness. But anything along those lines, what it does is it denies us the experience of being validated if we're angry or sad or ashamed or afraid. We're met with, don't feel that way, feel this way. And the impact of that is not only to make ourselves feel suppressed if we're applying that to ourselves, but if we're saying that to someone else, the other person is going to actually feel worse. So they're anxious. And then if they're met with toxic positivity, they're going to feel anxious and ashamed about feeling anxious. They're going to feel like it's their fault. And so it just alienates us even more from being able to receive our nervous system. Our nervous system is not asking for what it should feel. It already is feeling what it's feeling. What our nervous system is asking for is to be met. And so there's a way of meeting our nervous system And it could be along the lines of, if we're speaking to someone else, I see you're really sad. I know that that's hard for you. So we honor the state. We acknowledge the state. We validate the state. And I know that just like in times before, you've always found a way to move through this. So it's not denying the state, and it's offering some hopefulness, some realistic hopefulness, but it's not blaming someone's state on, you're not thinking positively enough. You're not doing enough to feel better. That just really makes people feel unmet, unheard, and invalidated. So I believe Chris was describing how his wife comes from a family of toxic positivity. So if we move towards the question, the way that I see this is his wife has grown up in a culture that really didn't allow herself to meet anything in her nervous system without some level of judgment or rejection, that she was told to be positive or to think on the bright side or don't let it get you down. And usually families that have this comes from parents, or it could have been linear, that it could be generational, that grandparents and great-grandparents may have had issues feeling into or accepting negative feelings or distressing feelings or sympathetic fight or flight or anything in the shutdown and collapse realm. So it would be natural for someone raised in that to be bringing that learning into a relationship, that this is how her family met life in the nervous system, was by trying always to steer towards the condoned and supported states, which were positive, happy, hopeful, feeling good, not angry or distressed or despairing. And so it would be natural that she'd bring that into the relationship. And if her partner, I think Chris, has not been exposed to that, he may find it annoying and difficult, especially if he may feel that he doesn't know whether to trust himself and his feelings or whether he should trust what she's saying. And so this is another example right here of a bit of co-dysregulation that goes on, right? So, like I said, when someone's in a defensive state, when they are hurting, they're in pain, they're angry, they're afraid, they need to be met and seen in that moment for where they are. Telling them that they shouldn't feel that way and giving them reasons why they shouldn't doesn't do anything except make the person feel not seen and like they have to hide their true self. They have to hide their feelings. So right there, that is going to create a zone of conflict in the relationship. And then Chris, he also shares something about himself that's really important. He loves his wife, and he also really values being in a harmonious relationship with her, which I hear as a relationship that avoids conflict. Now, that probably goes along with his wife's focus of this toxic positivity that was aimed at avoiding conflict and pain and sadness. But it sounds like Chris has also been doing work on his own nervous system. He's becoming more aware of his own feelings and states and reactions. And he was referring at one point in time to Deb Dana's 4 questions, which we've spoken about in the past, but I'll just bring them up again for short coverage here. The first question, this is what we ask of ourselves: what state am I in? And if I'm noticing I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm upset, if I'm noticing any quality of dysregulation, I'm just naming it, not judging it. That's the first question. Second question is, what do I need to move a bit more towards ventral, a bit more towards regulation, a bit, putting a couple of toes in it, not having to become completely there. So those are the questions we ask ourselves. And if we're in a relationship and we're having conflict or we're having a disconnected moment, The next two questions are about the other person. So the third question is, what state are they in? And the fourth question is, what might they be able to use or need right now that would help them move a little bit more towards regulation? So he's working the system here. He's trying to understand it. But he's also, he said, monitoring her reactions.
He used that word a couple of times, which is really interesting.
Isn't it? It feels like it's a burden, right?
Yeah.
Instead of being able to be in the relationship, he's kind of vigilant for what's safe and not safe. Again, very common trauma reaction. But it sounds like he's trying to monitor it. And he said at first managing it. And I actually think he did mean monitoring it, but I also think there's a slip in when he said managing it, because I think that he's trying to manage conflict by trying to monitor what's going on and try to meet her there, or to not cause conflict, not cause her to have an angry or upset reaction.
And he also used the word, he feels like an auditor.
Yes. Yes.
Which has that word itself just has sort of a burdensome tone to it.
Absolutely. He's really working at trying to make safety and connection a priority. But it also sounds like he's working harder than he should.
So it sounds to me like sorry, Jeffrey, I interrupted you. Did you have more on that?
No, I can go back to it. What are we going to say?
It sounds to me like our caller, Chris, is having a hard time transitioning from the first two questions. It sounds like he's got a little bit of clarity on where he is and what he might need. And then that pivot into, well, where's my partner and what they might need? There's something in the information that is either getting confused or not clear, or making him feel like he has to be this vigilant monitor. Is that your read of what's happening?
Yes. And I think, again, part of this is Chris bringing his nervous system learnings from his life into this relationship. But I think that if someone grew up in a toxic positivity family, then his wife may have a hard time being aware of or acknowledging any unhappy or painful states. She may always try to keep her chin up, be optimistic, look on the bright side, right? And so it can be very hard to read someone if what you're experiencing in them is their attempt to contain or suppress or discard any feelings that don't align with being uniformly and consistently positive. And the idea of regulation is never to always be in a positive or calm state. The first thing about regulation is to allow ourselves to be who we are, to understand we're always going to be moving in and out of different states. That's going to include regulation and dysregulation. And so it may be hard to read her because she may not be very comfortable being with or expressing what she feels. I've worked with some folks who could be very upset, and you would never know it from their face. They have learned how to keep their face neutral all the time, except maybe a smile can come out sometimes. But they don't show tears. They don't show facially signs of anger. Their eyes may tighten, the muscles around the eyes may tighten, the jaw may get a little bit more tight. But as far as expressions go, in general, people who have learned to really compress and suppress what they feel have also learned to kind of have a poker face in life, where they try their best to not convey what they're feeling because they want to convey that they're okay, that they're positive. They don't want to be failing according to their family standards. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I find myself coming back to Chris and trying to help Chris. We'll use the word trust. Use the word trust a few times, and maybe that's where we go with this. What is the trust piece that you're hearing in this? That it sounds like Chris isn't trusting himself, and he's also not trusting what his partner Anne is giving him.
Yes. So I think that what happens when we're not met with where we are, but given some sense of where we should be or why we have a problem feeling this way, we will very easily, especially if we grow up in dysfunctional family, we will very easily begin to question ourselves. Oh, maybe I don't feel that way. Maybe it's my fault I'm feeling this way. Maybe I'm not looking on the bright side and I'm just being overly negative or focusing on the bad or being, in a pity pot or having a pity party for me. There's all these ways of we can begin to judge and shame ourselves and doubt ourselves for what we're feeling. And so, number one, he probably gets shaky on whether he trusts his inner experience, right? So what I would do is, Chris, if you can answer question number one, what state are you in? That's your truth. There's no wrong place to be. You don't make a mistake by being there. We're there only because our nervous system has been summoned to protect us. We're not feeling safe. So anytime we're dysregulated, it's not our fault. It's our nervous system perceiving something that makes it feel a quality of threat or unsafety. And so we're shifting into states that are more protective, more defensive. But if he also is trying to read his wife, he may not get a lot of signals or verbal expressions that help him know what she's feeling. So that's where the trust now begins to get Chris in a spiral, where he gets confused. He doesn't know who to trust. He sometimes may not know what's right. Now, for any of our listeners who've grown up with a very narcissistic parent, narcissistic parents will often tell you what you're feeling, even though it has nothing to do with what you're feeling. They'll label your feeling as this or that, even though you actually might be sad, and they'll say you're angry or jealous or something else. That they project what they think or believe your state is, and then can attack it or blame you for it. So if we're in a relationship with a boss, a friend, a partner who does any of that or feels like they're doing that, it will make us both move towards feeling unsafe because we're not feeling met or received, we're feeling judged. And it will get us to doubt what we need because, if I'm angry, I need this, but I don't know if I'm angry. Maybe I'm sad, or, maybe I don't need her to change this if it's just that I need to be more positive instead of I need something from her. So it gets us more confused about what we're really feeling, less trusting in what we read in our partners, and more confused and less trusting about what we think we need. Now, this is painfully familiar to how a lot of children adapt to dysfunctional families, is they start losing themselves in the service of trying to remain in safer connection with their family members. So probably each time this happens at some level, Chris is trying not to lose himself or abandon himself, but something is coming up in the way that his wife reacts, and it's somehow connected, because he mentioned it a couple times, about this toxic positivity. So the first thing to know is that his wife is going to be uncomfortable with him feeling certain ways, like sad or angry or upset, because she was never allowed to get comfortable with those states. So she's going to be saying words to him that are more placing the blame on his state from his not doing enough positive thinking, versus empathizing and validating that he's sad or he's upset or he doesn't feel close or he feels hurt or disappointed.
I want to go to, I don't know. We'll see if this is a good question or not. I won't make a value statement on my question. I hear Chris trying to understand, really get down to like, well, what state is my partner in? What state are they in so I can best meet them? But what I'm wondering, like, is it enough sometimes to get the information of regulated or dysregulated?
Yes. But even that may be hard for him to tell if, and again, I'm making up a lot about the wife. I don't know her in person, so this may not be fair or accurate, but in my experience with working with people who grow up in a family like she did, like I said, they're good at facing life with somewhat of a poker face. So he may not get a lot of signals. And because of that, he may be picking up something that he projects. She doesn't like it. She's judging it. There's also a chance that that could be accurate. She may not be saying she's judging him or she doesn't like it. She may just be telling him, it's your fault for feeling this way. You can feel better. You just have to focus on the positive. And he's saying then that this is a type of betrayal is too strong a word. But it's almost a refusal to accept the other person where they are. Like, if you just did this, you'd be better. If you just did this, you wouldn't feel so bad. And when people are in a state, they don't need to be told what to do to feel better. They first need to be met. That's the most important thing, right? If you came up to me, Steve, and you were angry about something that had happened at the day at work or with friends or someplace else, and, you were trying to express your anger to me, and I just said to you, dude, you're sweating the small stuff here. Be grateful you're alive. Be grateful that the climate hasn't collapsed today. Come on, just focus on the good stuff. How would that feel?
It feels dismissive.
Yeah.
It feels like, wait, we're talking about that now?
Right.
I'm hurting here. I need this scene.
Right. Exactly. So it feels dismissive, and you don't feel more connected with me. If I'm saying that, you probably feel less connected with me. And I imagine either you're going to feel hurt, disappointed, and or angry that I'm meeting your attempt at sharing you with kind of a dismissive and what you should do to not feel this way. I think anyone would feel this. So I want to normalize this for Chris, is that anyone met in that way is going to feel like they're not being met. And that's going to be painful and inherently disconnecting and inherently co-dysregulating, right? If you came to me and you were hurt and upset, and I said, God, I'm so sorry you feel this upset. I really get why you'd be feeling this hurt and upset. I imagine instead of feeling dismissed or angry, you'd begin to feel a little bit more seen and a little bit closer to regulation. It just takes a difference in the way that we meet. So I also want to make sure that Chris doesn't hear I'm trying to throw his wife under the bus, because she's doing this not for any malicious reasons at all, but most likely for something that's in the family lineage of fear or discomfort with facing fear or pain or anger or discomfort. And so this is what she's showing. She's showing him and embodying to him what her nervous system has learned to do, or what her response to her nervous system feeling bad is to try to overpower it with positive thinking. And I think that is toxic. Not intentional, but the impact is toxic.
Jeffrey, can we get prescriptive with some things Chris and others might try or recall or attempt to remember when they're trying to work through this co-regulation?
I'm a big proponent of transparency, meaning to be able to discuss as clearly and as honestly and as transparently as you can what you're actually feeling. So say I'm upset and I need to feel understood right now, or at least share it with somebody. So I may not, unless I notice my partner is really dysregulated, because if they're really dysregulated, I'm not going to come with them with a need because they're going to be too dysregulated to answer it. But if I know what I need and my partner is relatively okay, not showing signs of massive dysregulation one way or another, I would come up and say, hey, I'm noticing I'm feeling sad. What I could use is, number one, a hug, and number two, for you to just be with it, not to fix it, but to just let me talk with you about it and to be a companion with it, right? And even speaking to her about what you need. If she starts, trying to move by habit into some toxic positivity, he could try to say, sweetheart, I know that this is your way of thinking you fix it, but truly what I need right now is not that. That actually makes me feel worse. What I really could use from you is just some understanding and some space to receive me as I'm feeling this without making it feel wrong. And now he could go on to say, and this is a little risky, if we do have enough understanding of our partner, we could say, I know that you hearing or feeling my discomfort can make you feel uncomfortable enough that it triggers that response from your family about wanting to make it better. So I know this is hard for you. And if you can't do it right now, that's okay. But if you can, it would really, really help me. So it's not blaming, right? And it's acknowledging that what sends her into toxic positivity is not just habit. There is habit involved, but what triggers it is perceiving either his unhappiness and pain or perceiving at some lower level how his unhappiness and pain is making her feel, which often, if we're connected to someone else's nervous system, if they're unhappy, we'll feel some of that unhappiness. If they're angry, we may feel some of that anger as well. And so she may be not wanting it in him, and she also may not be wanting it in her. So this would be an ask, and I don't think it's a one and done. I think that this would need to be done over time, about learning to create more space in the relationship for this. Now, this is also a place, right, where it may be really supportive for this couple to seek some couples therapy. Ideally, with someone who is somewhat trained in a nervous system perspective or a polyvagal perspective to really kind of address this issue of nervous system impacting nervous system. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the same things, about family of origin and those dynamics and our competing needs. But I have found that if we also address it from a nervous system perspective, it gets to the heart of what creates most conflicts for most couples, is when something makes either of us dysregulated. That your pain is too much for me, your sadness feels too much for me in this moment, or I get afraid and I don't know how to meet it. And so I just want to tell you how to swat it down, because that's what I do. And it's worked for me and my family. So I'd like you to work on this and just swat it down. Now, that's where I think deeper work is really required, because our partner may need to understand in some deeper way that they're actually only allowing a teeny slice of me into the relationship. The happy, mostly regulated me, not complaining, not unhappy, not pissed off, not feeling shame, not afraid. And all of us, I think, we want connection, but we seek a kind of connection where we can be much more of our full and authentic self versus this reduced slice of us that is acceptable in the other person's eyes.
It strikes me in hearing your advice for Chris that as I was watching your body language and listening to your words, it was very co-regulating language. What do you need? Are you willing to asking questions? You even sort of drop your voice and you embody this beautifully, Jeffrey, this co-regulation state. That's what I saw. And the phrase that came to mind, and I guess it's obvious, is co-dysregulation breeds more dysregulation. And when we can try to use some of this regulating language and mindset and approach, that starts to move it back to where he's trying to get to. So it sounds like he's trying to solve initially the problem from a co-dysregulated state and getting dysregulation out the back end and saying, hey, this isn't what I wanted. What I hear is your invitation to find some of those regulating, being a regulating presence or listening or reflecting back to the person.
Yes. And I think that ties into trust. Because if I don't trust what I'm feeling, then I'm not going to trust what I think I might need. And then if I'm doubting myself, well, I don't know what I want, and I don't know if I should ask for it. And if I want this, will that make a bad reaction in her? Will it cause more conflict? Will we lose our harmonious connection? And what I'd say to Chris is the most harmonious connection can be when both of you are allowed to be true to yourselves, right? Not having to impose on each other limitations or expectations from our past. And most of those limitations and expectations are not just what we learned, but what feels safer for our individual nervous system. And what working with your nervous system can do is it can widen your window of tolerance. It can allow you to be much more comfortable with the few limited ways we were allowed to be comfortable in our family of origin. We can have more of a palette of our true emotions, own them, and be able to see that other people have different emotions and different reactions and allow that. Many of us want our partners to keep in line with whatever expectations or rules we grew up with. So I think that, yes, searching for some regulation, he will be best served if he first can begin to trust. And I said, if he answers question number 1, what state am I in? That's his truth. He's going to know that. You don't have to think about that very long. You just kind of feel inside, and you're going to be contracted and hot and irritated, or you're going to be frightened and your heart's going to be raced a little bit. You're going to be thinking about needing to get away, or you're going to feel this shut down, collapse, slumpy, shamed, despairing place. And that's the true state of where you are in the moment. That is not defining who you are. It's just the weather, the current weather report, right? And a lot of times we begin to blame ourselves for whatever feeling we're having. And Chris may have done this prior to ever being with his wife. But if his wife meets him fairly consistently with toxic positivity, he will actually begin to doubt himself even more.
Jeffrey, thank you for helping us go a layer deeper in this theme this week of co-regulation. We seem to be on a co-regulation kick in the past couple episodes. Chris, we hope this was helpful. We hope there's something in here that you can start to explore and unpack and start to answer the questions that you're holding. And friends, if you've got questions that you're holding that you want to share with us, we would love them. We have a voicemail set up. That number is 866-357-5156. You can leave a voicemail. You can be anonymous. You can leave your name. It's entirely up to you. If you can't reach that number because of the country you're in and leave a voicemail, or typing is just more your thing, you can send us an email, and I'll leave that email link in our show notes. And you'll find that phone number also in our show notes, friends, so you don't have to rewind. Jeffrey, I know we started this podcast by me unpacking some terms for some of our friends, but you go into some of these in a free offering that we created for people. I'm wondering if you could share that and how people can get that and learn a little bit more about your work.
Sure. So Steve and I intentionally made this video because we knew that people would come in at different stages in the podcast. We wanted to give a place to land and to understand the basic map of what we're using. So there's a video free on my site called Why Do I Feel Stuck? And it talks about the 3 different nervous system states, stories that each state drives, and practices, simple practices that you can do to shift from a dysregulated state and back towards a regulated state. And you can get that free gift by going to drjeffreyrutstein.com/links. That's plural, LINKS. And on that page will be a link to free gift. Just go there and you can grab it for your own. And I hope it's helpful. And Steve, thank you so much for this fun exploration that we do. I really enjoy our time together, and I really enjoy the way that we can actually go into depth on some of these questions. It feels good.
I agree. It feels good to be able to share in this way. I also deeply enjoy any number of directions these conversations go when we're together. So thank you for your time, and I'll catch you next week.
Sounds great. Remember, friends, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not meant as a substitute for qualified healthcare. If you are suffering or struggling, please do reach out to a qualified physical or mental health practitioner. And thank you so much for being with us today. Hope to see you next time. Bye for now.